Hello, and welcome to episode 173 of Prose. This week, seek connection on a train, and breathe with the cherubim. Well, for all those who celebrate, Merry Christmas. This episode is not a Christmas episode, though, simply another episode of Prose with two tales. Rather than go on and on about social media, the novella on Amazon, Patreon, and all that jazz, let me just say, hey, no matter what you celebrate, where you are, I hope you're having a great day. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to go run off and hang out with my family. So no matter what you're doing, please enjoy these tales. Let's get to them, shall we? This week we have Riding Along and An Exhalation of Angels by Elizabeth Peterson. Enjoy. Riding Along, an original short story by Jared I. McGee.
Yep, and then going on to next, and then the side of Far Rockaway. Far Rockaway.
That mechanized voice had come to mean something to me. Everything else here was empty and strange. But these few, squawk-boxing, beautiful humans were the captains of these ships of the underground. As I sat on my train home from a wonderful night out with new people and new things and new ideas, I couldn't help but feel alone, except for the mechanized man. I didn't quite know where I was going. I knew that through the garbled bits and bobs, Far Rock meant that I was heading in the direction of home. I have trouble not looking in people's faces. There that night, on that train, there weren't very many people, but I looked them in the eyes nonetheless. Directly in front of me, a young woman read a book. It looked like a weathered copy of A Feast for Crows. I loved that book the first time I read it. I bet we'd be friends. I bet she doesn't like the show as much as I don't. I bet we'd agree on that. But I can't say anything. That's not what is done. That's not how this works, especially not now in the modern era. I can't broach that conversation. I breathe in. I breathe out. I look in a different direction before my journey mate thinks me odd or aggressive. Further to my left, there's a 30-something-year-old man and what appears to be a teenager canoodling in the corner. I don't quite know what to say about that. I try not to stare as I begin to do age math. At first, I think he's her father or older brother or cousin, but that canoodling really does get a little bit hot and heavy. Moreover, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. What is she doing out with him? Clearly, this is a relationship that means something that I don't quite understand. I move on. The only man standing up looks ragged and broken and tired. He looks hungry, and he's asking for money. No one will look him in the face. I look him in the face. The brakes screech, and we pause for a moment.
Where's the next question? Yep, just A far up. A far up.
We start picking up steam, and he hasn't stopped meeting my gaze. He starts making his way down the train, and I keep staring him in the eyes. Everyone says that's not what you're supposed to do or what you're not supposed to do, however you want to say it, but he seemed lonely. I'm lonely. I understand what it's like to be isolated and not have eyes meet eyes. We both made prisons for ourselves. From the tracks on his arms, it looks like he made his prison from bad decisions regarding needles and drugs. My prison? It's also self-made, I just don't quite know when I started constructing it. I was once gregarious and open and sometimes even the life of the party. But then, my chameleon nature made me be everything to everyone at all times, shifting and moving, Mercury in motion. One begins to lose oneself when one cannot remember. I can't remember who I was. I have vague recollections, but it seems so far in the past at this point, it's not worth really buckling down on. Well, the man actually came up to me. He asked for money. I gave it to him. Why wouldn't I? He looked hungry, and I didn't give him enough for too much of the poison he wanted to put back in his veins. Instead, I probably gave him enough for another poison. A Big Mac, or some dollar menu items, or a donut, or a cup of coffee to keep the poor guy warm in the middle of January. People wouldn't meet his eyes. They won't meet mine either. After I give the man his $5, he goes about his way, hand out, asking others for money. He doesn't seem very impressed with the lack of interaction he gets, but he keeps on moving along. I'm always surprised by the bravery of those men and women. Not the asking for money, but the way they just jolt and leap between cars as a subway train is moving at top speed. Those mechanized voices, those friends of mine, they tell me not to do that, and I obey the rules. Maybe that's my problem. Maybe that's what I did wrong, where I lost myself. Once, I sought to always question and push all boundaries. Rules were a construct that was absurd. Now I sit, legs crossed tightly, staring at anything but my fellow man, because I'm told I'm not supposed to. And yet, when I gave that man the $5, when I made the eye contact with him, that was humanity. That was feeling. I'm only 2 stops away and everyone else seems to be gone now. It is rather late. It is a weeknight. Still, for a city that never sleeps, everyone sure seems to go to bed early. I vaguely wonder what my friends are doing in the far-flung places of the world. what Jane is doing down in Long Beach. She had such great aspirations of being a senator. I wonder if she's even making any headway that way. I think of Eleanor from Denmark. She was such a good friend. She hosted me several times in my travels. She showed me Europe. I think she loved me. I think of Mark, one of the best guitarists I've ever known in my life. I think he lives in Seattle now. Not making music, mind you. I'm pretty sure that he's a graphic designer for a legal pot company. Man, that guy could play. He had such a future, had he only just held on.
Yep, this is Lafayette. Yep, and this is the A4 record.
Lost in thought, I almost missed my stop. I wait for the doors to open. Always a little awkwardly, I must admit. I don't quite have the timing down. And I leap out of my car right as they do. As is my habit now, rather than just walking away from the car that I was in, I look up and down the track to try to meet eyes with the owner of that mechanized voice. I meet eyes with him again. I meet eyes with him too, like I did the $5 man. The mechanized voice waves at me with a slight quirk of a smile. I wave at him, letting him know as best I can through the small tilt of a wrist and the small scrunching of my cheeks, and hopefully what is a genuine light in my eyes, that I appreciate him leading me through all these twists and turns. A guide in a labyrinth to someone all alone. Thank you for listening to Riding Along, an original short story by me, Jared I. McGee. Please stick around for yet another tale this week. I think you're going to like this one. And man, do I love it when you join me. An Exhalation of Angels, an original short story by Elizabeth Peterson. She could feel her way through the darkness. She knew there was something she was waiting for, but the thought was still unformed in her mind. Could she call it a mind? She was unsure what form her body was currently in. All she knew was that she had fallen and been surrounded by blinding light and pain, followed by a brief flashing light. The brightest she'd ever seen, before being plummeted into darkness. She had a vague sense of light and dark and knew that there were others around her. She had an overwhelming sensation that she was not alone, and she couldn't tell whether this was terrifying or reassuring. Maybe a little of both. She could feel her grasp on her identity slipping, and flashes from her life shone like broken projections in a haze of light. She saw a choir, a red carpet, and a recently polished chandelier in a fragmented vision
that quickly shifted to neon lights, accented with the heavy bass of stereo speakers. This vision felt claustrophobic, and she was glad when it changed again to a flash of Unity. Was Unity a place? With a row of lanterns held together by black bandanas. A thin and static-filled line of music lifted from the vision. The voices sounded in unison, an almost haunted chorus with words she couldn't decipher. She knew that this phase, whatever it was temporary, even though she wasn't sure about where she was going from here. She was not afraid, and held on to the last few notes of the choir with such a detached fervor that she could feel her sense of self shifting once more. How could she feel a tune so familiar, and still know it to be so far off and disconnected? The others near her felt even more present as she stirred in the darkness. Change felt imminent, and she knew that her current state would be shifting soon. Although from what and to what she couldn't tell. The chorus began a new tune and grew stronger, and the visions flashed through more vignettes at increasing speeds. She was caught up in a whirlwind of black and had no sense of time or direction. All she could tell was that the music grew in urgency, and the other beings around her spun in a similar frenzy. Her surroundings changed. Bright red, vivid blue, blinding white, a disorienting rainbow in broad, all-encompassing flashes that turned to a color that surpassed them all. The opposite of darkness expelled the other colors in a single dazzling moment. An exhalation of angels. Suddenly, she knew. Other beings formed around her with the same newfound recognition of their being. They were light. They had been through dark and could banish it of their own volition. She knew instinctively that she had come from earth through purgatory to enlightenment. When she thought of her previous life, she felt love tinged with loss near her transition. Her angel wings gave her life anew. She could leave the comfortable sorrow of her past, because she no longer had a past. She is now, and she is forever.
Thank you for listening to An Exhalation of Angels, an original short story by Elizabeth Peterson. Miss Peterson, as many of you know, has appeared on the show as a voice actor a couple times now. Miss Peterson is an educator, mathematician, and playwright who can be found between New England, Scotland, and Canada. She likes logic and words, and her favorite words are
Syzygy, eleemosynary,
and
logo de daily.
You can read her theater reviews and thoughts on the world at her website, mathematicalmedievalist.wordpress.com. All sounds you have heard throughout episode 94 come from YouTube's royalty-free audio library and the always amazing freesound.org. Everything is being used under CC 01.0 Universal Public Domain Dedication licenses. That does it this week for Prose. Thank you for putting up with the weird sounds as I travel and do this mobily. Please do consider sharing the podcast with someone, and of course, as you continue about your day, I hope that you'll remember to love those around you,
Tell them that you do and embrace this life as it is, forever stranger than fiction. See you next time.